My wife cheated while I paid off her student loans, so I filed for divorce and took everything without looking back, leaving her life in ruins. I'm a 32-year-old guy who truly believed love meant sacrifice, so when my wife drowned under the weight of her student loans, I stepped forward without hesitation. I remember signing extra shift forms with trembling hands, telling myself exhaustion was temporary and her freedom was forever. Every night I came home sore, smelling of oil and sweat, while she sat cross-legged on the couch scrolling through career blogs and whispering thank you like a soft lullaby. She would smile and say, "You're my hero, I couldn't do this without you," and I swallowed the pride like a warm drink against freezing doubt. Inside, I felt important, needed, chosen, even as my savings account shrank and my personal dreams quietly suffocated. The apartment always felt dim and tired, yellow light buzzing overhead, bills stacked like silent accusations on our kitchen counter. I would joke, "One day we'll laugh about this," and she'd laugh too, promising, "Once I'm stable, everything changes for us." Those words became my oxygen, my justification for every cancelled trip, every ignored want. I ignored the way she turned her phone screen away, or how her laugh changed when certain messages came through late at night. I told myself relationships were messy, people needed space, and trust meant not asking questions. Still, there were moments when her eyes felt distant, like she was already miles ahead in a life I wasn't fully invited into. When I reached for her in bed, she sometimes shifted subtly, murmuring she was just tired. I convinced myself I was paranoid, that love simply looked quieter after years together. But deep under the devotion and duty, a flicker of unease quietly sparked, like something fragile about to shatter. And somewhere inside me, a question I refused to voice began slowly, painfully forming there. I'm a 32-year-old guy who kept telling himself everything was fine, even as the air between us started feeling heavier every single night. She began coming home later than usual, her heels clicking against the floor in a rushed rhythm, her perfume lingering sharp and unfamiliar. When I'd ask, "You okay?" "You're home late again," she'd sigh and say, "Stop worrying, it's just work stress, you're overthinking." And like a fool, I'd nod, swallowing my unease because I trusted her more than my own instincts. Her phone became an extension of her hand, always face down, always locked, always drifting just out of my reach. One night I joked, "You're more attached to that thing than you are to me," and she snapped, "Can you not start something over nothing?" The sudden edge in her voice stung more than I wanted to admit. I stood there, heart tight, apologizing for a problem I didn't even understand. Inside, I felt myself shrinking, doubting, questioning my own sanity. I watched her smile at incoming texts, a softness I hadn't seen in weeks, and something twisted painfully in my chest. When I leaned over playfully, she tilted the screen away, saying, "It's just my coworker asking about a project." I forced a laugh, pretending that explanation was enough, even though it sounded rehearsed. The room felt colder, like the walls themselves were aware something was slipping away. At night, when the apartment went quiet, I stared at the ceiling, counting every moment I'd sacrificed for her future. I replayed her compliments, her hero speeches, trying to convince myself she could never hurt me. But a voice deep inside whispered that love wasn't supposed to feel this tense, this uncertain, this lonely. The more I ignored the signs, the louder my thoughts became, spinning with doubt and quiet dread. And as she stepped out for another late work meeting, I stood by the window watching her fade into the darkness, my heart bracing for a truth I wasn't ready to face yet. I'm a 32-year-old guy who still wanted to believe my marriage was saving itself, even when doubt started poisoning every quiet moment. That night, everything shifted when her phone lit up on the kitchen counter while she showered, the screen flashing a preview that made my stomach drop. "Can't stop thinking about last night." The name wasn't one I recognized, and my fingers hovered over the phone, shaking like I already knew the answer. "Don't be stupid," I whispered to myself, walking away, heart pounding so hard it echoed in my ears. When she came out wrapped in a towel, humming softly, I forced a smile I didn't feel. "Who's texting you so late?" I asked, trying to sound casual, almost joking. Her expression flickered for half a second before she laughed. "It's just a coworker, relax." I nodded, but the air between us felt thicker, tense, like a storm building behind calm skies. Inside, my chest burned with questions I was terrified to speak aloud. Later, when she stepped out to take a call, I stared at her abandoned phone like it was a loaded weapon. My hand moved before my mind agreed, tapping the screen, my heart racing as messages opened. Flirty jokes, inside references, a tone that was far too intimate for just work. My throat went dry, and I quickly locked the screen, guilt crashing over me like I'd committed some unforgivable crime. When she returned, her smile felt forced, practiced. "Everything all right?" she asked, brushing past me casually. "Yeah, just tired," I replied, swallowing the truth like broken glass. I didn't know whether I was more hurt by what I'd seen or by how easily she lied to my face. The room suddenly felt colder, unfamiliar, like home had quietly shifted while I wasn't looking. That night, lying beside her, every shallow breath she took felt miles away. My mind replayed those messages over and over, my heart clinging to denial, desperate for another explanation. But deep down, buried beneath fear and loyalty, I could feel it, a truth slowly clawing its way toward the surface, waiting for the moment it could no longer be ignored. I'm a 32-year-old guy who finally realized denial couldn't protect me anymore, no matter how desperately I wanted it to. 2 days after seeing those messages, a mutual friend casually mentioned her name at lunch and said, "Hey, I ran into your wife downtown yesterday, she was with some guy." My heart stuttered as I forced a laugh and asked, "What guy?" He hesitated, then shrugged. They looked close, man. Holding hands, laughing, like a couple. The words felt like ice sliding down my spine, slow and merciless. That night, I didn't sleep. The apartment felt heavier, the air stale and suffocating, every shadow sharper than before. When she left her laptop open on the kitchen table, my hands moved without permission, flipping it open as my chest tightened. Hotel confirmations, shared photo folders, heart emojis, explicit jokes I'd never heard her make with me. I sat there, staring at the screen, feeling my world fracture in absolute silence. This wasn't flirting. This was real. Ongoing. Intentional. When she walked in and saw my expression, her smile faltered. "Why are you on my laptop?" she snapped, defensive instead of ashamed. "Who is he?" I asked, my voice hollow, almost unrecognizable. "Stop being dramatic, you're twisting things," she fired back, grabbing the laptop, her tone sharp and cold. I watched the woman I loved morph into someone I barely recognized, and something in me quietly shattered. The realization crashed into me like a tidal wave when dates lined up, hotel nights on weekends I worked double shifts, messages from months ago when I made my largest loan payments. She hadn't just cheated. She had done it while I broke my body to build her future. The betrayal wasn't accidental. It was calculated, lived, normalized. I stood there, nails digging into my palms, breathing through the burning in my chest, while she rolled her eyes and muttered, "You're making a big deal out of nothing." But in that moment, I knew everything. The love, the promises, the gratitude, all of it had been layered over a lie. And as she walked past me like I was an inconvenience instead of her husband, a terrifying, unfamiliar calm settled over me, the kind that comes right before something inside you changes forever. I'm a 32-year-old guy who stopped reacting and started watching, like my heart had gone numb just enough to survive the truth. I didn't confront her again, not yet. Instead, I moved through the apartment like a ghost, noticing every lie with painful clarity. The way her voice softened when she laughed at her phone, the way she avoided my eyes when I entered the room, the faint scent of another cologne clinging to her jacket. It all felt surgically precise, like discovering a wound and choosing to study it instead of screaming. One evening she passed by me in the kitchen and said casually, "You've been distant lately, is something wrong with you?" Her words felt almost insulting. I stared at her, biting back the truth, and forced out, "Just tired. Work's been brutal." She nodded absently, already tapping a message as if I barely existed. The imbalance tasted bitter on my tongue, like rust mixed with heartbreak. At night, the bed felt colder even when her body lay inches away. She scrolled through her phone under the soft glow of the screen, smiling to herself, while I stared at the ceiling questioning every decision I'd ever made. "Who keeps you so entertained?" I murmured quietly. She didn't even look at me. "You're reading too much into things. Can you just relax for once?" The dismissiveness stung deeper than anger ever could. I watched her move through our space with careless confidence, behaving like I had already faded from her world. Inside, my grief shifted, hardening into something unfamiliar and dangerous. I wasn't just hurt anymore. I was cataloging. memorizing, preparing. Every word she spoke felt like a performance, every affectionate gesture now hollow and transactional. The apartment felt smaller with every lie, the air thick with unsaid truths and quiet tension. I knew confrontation would come, but not yet. I needed to see how far she'd go. How deeply she'd buried me beneath someone else. And as she stepped out again that night, murmuring, "Don't wait up," a chilling thought crept into my mind. I didn't know if I wanted my wife back, or if I was already imagining what life would feel like without her. I'm a 32-year-old guy who thought I'd already seen the worst of it, until I finally learned who the other man was. It happened when she left her tablet on the coffee table, a message flashing across the screen from a name I didn't recognize, followed by a photo preview I wish I could erase forever. My hands trembled as I opened it, and there he was, smiling, relaxed, his arm loosely around her waist like it belonged there. The casual familiarity in the way they stood together made my chest ache in a way I didn't know was possible. I stared at his profile, scrolling through bits of their conversation, and realized with sick clarity that he knew she was married. He joked about sneaking around and called me the boring husband, and she'd responded with laughing emojis like it was all some twisted game. "You told him about me?" I muttered under my breath, my throat burning. It wasn't just an affair. It was mockery. Humiliation dressed as excitement. When she came home, I studied her face like it was a stranger's. "Who's Mark?" I asked quietly, my voice flat and controlled. She froze for a second before scoffing, "Why are you creeping through my stuff now?" The blame slid smoothly onto me, as if I was the problem for discovering the truth. "You didn't deny it," I whispered, and she rolled her eyes. "It's not what you think. You're exaggerating again." Again. That word echoed in my mind like a knife twisting deeper. She spoke to him with warmth, affection, openness I hadn't felt from her in months. The realization that she wasn't just cheating physically, but emotionally building something with him, shattered what little hope I still clung to. Every laugh, every whispered conversation, every secret moment now replayed in my head in grotesque detail. I sat alone on the edge of our bed later, listening to the quiet hum of the refrigerator and the faint ticking of the clock in the hallway. My reflection in the dark window looked tired, hollow, defeated. I wondered how long she'd been viewing me as nothing more than financial support while someone else got the part of her that used to be mine. And as my phone vibrated with a bank notification, another massive loan payment processed, a bitter thought crawled through my mind. She wasn't just betraying me with him, she was replacing me with him too. I'm a 32-year-old guy who thought I'd already hit my breaking point, until the night I realized just how little I meant to the woman I loved. It happened when I came home early from work, the apartment unusually quiet except for her voice echoing from the bedroom, low and sharp. I paused in the hallway as I heard her laugh into the phone and say, "He's so obsessed with taking care of me, it's actually pathetic. I just let him feel important." My chest tightened, the air suddenly thin, every word slicing through me slow and deliberate. I stood frozen, listening to her mock my sacrifices like they were nothing more than a joke. "Yeah, he'd do anything for me," she continued, her tone dripping with amusement. "It's easy, honestly." My hands trembled at my sides, the weight of every sleepless night, every double shift, every dream I buried crashing down on me all at once. I wasn't her hero. I wasn't her husband. I was a resource she drained without guilt or remorse. When she finally stepped out and saw me standing there, her expression hardened. "How long have you been eavesdropping?" she snapped, instantly defensive. "Long enough to know I meant nothing to you," I said quietly, my voice barely holding together. She scoffed, shaking her head. "You're being dramatic. If you didn't want to help, you could have said no." The audacity of it sucked the breath from my lungs. Something inside me collapsed completely. I walked out onto the balcony, the night air cold against my skin, city lights blurring as tears burned in my eyes. I wasn't just betrayed, I felt erased, diminished, foolish for giving someone my entire soul. The man I used to be felt distant, almost unrecognizable, as if she'd hollowed me out over time. Deep inside, the emotional numbness turned heavy, dark, suffocating. I realized I had given everything to someone who never valued me, never respected me, never truly loved me. And as I leaned against the cold railing, staring down at the quiet street below, a terrifying thought crept into my mind. I didn't know if I could survive feeling this broken, but I also didn't know if I was ready to let her destroy me any further. I'm a 32-year-old guy who woke up the next morning feeling hollow, but strangely clear, like the fog of love had finally burned away. The apartment felt colder than usual, sunlight barely cutting through half-closed blinds, dust drifting lazily in the air like the aftermath of a quiet war. I watched her move around the kitchen, casual and unapologetic, humming as if she hadn't crushed me the night before. "You're really not going to talk about yesterday?" I asked, my voice steady despite the storm inside. She didn't even look at me. "There's nothing to talk about if you'd stop acting insane." Her words should have hurt more, but instead they slid off me, sharp but ineffective. Something inside me had shifted overnight, and I could feel it settling into place with controlled precision. I nodded slowly and murmured, "Yeah, you're right," and the light tasted metallic on my tongue. In that moment, I wasn't trying to fix us anymore. I was deciding how to free myself. The rest of the day passed like a trance, my body moving through routines while my mind catalogued everything I needed to survive. Every shared bank account, every document, every legal thread tying us together. I found myself researching divorce laws in quiet corners on my phone, heart pounding but strangely calm. In the break room at work, the hum of vending machines drowned my thoughts as I whispered, "You're not weak. You're waking up." When I came home, she barely acknowledged my presence, her laughter floating from the bedroom as she talked to him again. I stood by the doorway, listening, and didn't feel rage anymore, just clarity. She had chosen her path, and now I was choosing mine. At dinner, she asked pointedly, "You're acting weird. What's going on?" I met her eyes and forced a controlled smile. "Just exhausted. I think I finally see things clearly." Her brow furrowed slightly, suspicion flickering behind her gaze, but she shrugged it off like everything else. Inside, my heart no longer begged for her love. It was doing something colder, sharper, deliberate. And as I lay awake that night, staring into the shadows above our bed, a single thought repeated over and over in my mind. She has no idea what's coming. I'm a 32-year-old guy who learned how to move like silence, because silence was the only power left in my hands. Every day after that moment of clarity, I became methodical, careful, almost surgical. I gathered bank statements, screenshots, loan confirmations, and every message that proved the sacrifices I'd made and the betrayal she'd hidden. The printer hummed late at night while she slept beside me, unaware that our version of forever was quietly being dismantled page by page. Each document felt like a brick in the wall I was building between us. At work, I sat in a gray conference room across from a divorce attorney, my palms damp against a polished mahogany table. "You've covered her debts almost entirely," she said, flipping through my file, "and with proof of infidelity, you're in a strong position." Her calm voice contrasted sharply with the storm inside my chest. I nodded slowly, whispering, "I just want my life back." It felt strange saying that out loud, like admitting a truth my heart had avoided for years. When I returned home that evening, she was sprawled on the couch, phone in hand, laughing softly. "You look serious," she muttered. "Long day," I replied, hanging my coat like nothing had changed. The lie slid from my lips smoothly, and I hated how natural deception now felt. We ate dinner in tense silence, forks clinking against plates, the flicker of the television filling the space between us. She didn't ask where I'd been. She didn't care. 3 days later, the knock came. Sharp. Official. Final. I watched through the peephole as a man in a suit stood with an envelope in hand. "For you," he said neutrally as she opened the door. Her confusion turned to panic as she read the words printed across the page. "What is this?" she demanded, voice suddenly trembling. "You're divorcing me?" I walked forward slowly, calm, grounded, controlled. "You already divorced us months ago," I said quietly, meeting her widened eyes. The color drained from her face, the mask finally cracking. She stared at me like she was seeing a stranger, and for the first time, I realized I actually was one now. And as her hands shook around the papers and her voice broke into disbelief, I knew this was only the beginning of the storm she never saw coming. I'm a 32-year-old guy who watched her world start tilting the moment reality finally hit her. She paced the living room clutching the divorce papers, her voice rising and cracking as confusion turned to desperation. You can't just do this, she snapped, eyes glossy with sudden fear. After everything I've done for you? The irony landed so hard it almost made me laugh, but all I felt was cold, detached clarity. What you've done for me? I repeated quietly. You mean lying, cheating, and laughing at my devotion behind my back? Her mouth opened, but no words came out this time. The same woman who once treated my love like a joke now trembled like the stability she depended on had vanished overnight. The apartment felt charged, thick with panic and disbelief, while the soft ticking of the clock marked each second of her unraveling. Days passed, and the financial consequences began crashing down on her with brutal force. I closed shared accounts, froze cards, and redirected automatic payments that had been cushioning her lifestyle for years. My card got declined at the grocery store, she shouted one evening, slamming her phone onto the counter. What did you do? I looked at her calmly, almost bored. I stopped paying for things that never belonged to me. Her affair partner vanished almost instantly when he realized she was drowning instead of living carefree. I caught her crying in the bathroom late one night, mascara streaked and breath uneven. He won't answer my calls, she sobbed when she noticed me in the doorway. I thought he cared. I said nothing, the silence between us heavier than any insult I could have thrown. The woman who once mocked my sacrifices now begged for the stability she'd thrown away. We can fix this, she pleaded one night, voice shaking. Just give me a chance. I stared at her like a stranger, my heart unmoved, my expression unreadable. The more she crumbled, the clearer my own strength became. But even as her world collapsed around her, something darker surfaced behind her eyes, a desperate edge, a quiet resentment, like someone preparing for a final act. And when she whispered, almost to herself, "You're really going to leave me with nothing?" I realized with unsettling certainty, she still didn't understand what losing me truly meant. I'm a 32-year-old guy who stood face to face with the woman who once felt like my entire world, and barely recognized the reflection of who she'd become. The apartment felt suffocating as she hovered in front of me, eyes red, voice trembling between anger and desperation. You're really destroying my life over one mistake, she whispered, trying to twist the narrative like she always had. My jaw tightened as I replied calmly, it wasn't one mistake. It was months of betrayal and years of disrespect I chose to ignore. She stepped closer, hands clenched, her voice cracking. I was confused, okay? You were always working, always tired. I felt lonely. The words pierced through me, not with pain, but with clarity. Lonely? I echoed bitterly. You had my loyalty, my money, my future, and you still chose someone else. Her eyes filled with tears, but I could see through them now, like rain on glass instead of truth. The scent of cold coffee and stale air filled the room as she dropped onto the couch, burying her face in her hands. I messed up, she choked. But you don't have to end us like this. My heart should have ached. It should have softened. Instead, it felt steady, almost peaceful. You ended us the moment you turned my sacrifices into a joke, I said softly, every word deliberate, every syllable final. She looked up at me, face streaked with smeared mascara, voice fragile and raw. You're really okay with watching me suffer? For the first time, I spoke with complete honesty. I'm okay with choosing myself for once. The silence that followed felt heavy, sacred, like the final breath of something already dead. She stood slowly, eyes hardening behind the tears, a mixture of regret and something darker buzzing beneath the surface. You think this makes you strong, she murmured. You think this is over? Her tone shifted, sharp, almost threatening, and for a split second, the air between us turned dangerously still. I didn't flinch. I didn't step back. I just watched her, realizing she wasn't ready to accept defeat, and neither was this story. And as she turned away, wiping her face and muttering something under her breath I couldn't fully hear, a chill crept down my spine, warning me the final storm hadn't hit yet. I'm a 32-year-old guy who once built his entire world around a woman who taught me, the hard way, what strength really looks like. The night after that final confrontation, I walked into the apartment one last time, the air filled with the faint echo of every memory that no longer owned me. Her bags were already packed, sitting by the door like remnants of a storm that had finally burned itself out. She stood there silently, eyes hollow, her pride too shattered to beg again. For once, she had nothing left to say. I looked around at the space I once called home, the chipped counter where I'd counted pennies, the worn couch where I'd convinced myself love meant pain. "So this is it," she muttered, her voice thin and exhausted. I nodded slowly, feeling a strange calm settle into my bones. "This is where I finally stopped paying for a life you never wanted to protect." The words didn't come from anger. They came from certainty. She scoffed weakly, trying to mask the ruin behind her eyes. "You think you'll be happier alone?" I paused, letting the question hang between us, and softly replied, "I think I'll finally be honest with myself." Outside, the evening air was cool and clean, brushing against my face like something new attempting to find me. Each step away from the door felt heavier, but also lighter somehow, like grief and freedom walking hand in hand. As I reached the bottom of the stairs, my phone buzzed with a notification, the final loan repayment confirmation. Paid. Finished. Closed. I stared at the screen, emotions tangling in my chest, relief, pain, pride, and something close to peace. Years of sacrifice, humiliation, and silence had finally hit their end point. Behind me, I heard the soft thud of the apartment door closing, sealing a chapter I'd bled through to survive. I didn't turn around. I didn't need to. The silence that followed wasn't empty anymore. It was mine. And as I walked forward into the quiet nighttime streets, I realized something powerful, something I'd forgotten over years of devotion. She didn't ruin my life. She showed me the moment I chose to reclaim it.